Hello, welcome to the Combat Chatters podcast. Today we're going to be talking about last week's UFC card. It was a fight night between Holm and Viera. Interesting card. We're going to go over the main card. This week, obviously, there's not a card just this week, so we're not going to go over anything for the next coming up week. But we are going to be going over some of the fights, and we have some interesting ones. We're going to start off with the middleweight bout between Eric Anders and Park Jin-young.
Yeah, so this fight, I think Eric Anders really struggled to find the distance because he started off quick. I mean, he was applying a lot of pressure, like a lot of straights early on, trying to find his chin. And he spoke about beforehand his size and how he can use it in this weight class. And he very clearly tried to do that because, I mean, off the top of my head, I think I remember, if I remember the stat correct, I think it was like 23 to 25 takedown attempts. I think he got 2 or 3 takedowns. So it was a lot of Young just defending and defending. He showed excellent counter punching. I think he definitely won the fight. There was a lot where the judges, I think, did the wrong things in this card, and it started with this because I think although Anders pressed forward and it made the fight look more competitive than it was, in my opinion.
So I think it was an interesting fight, really. I mean, it wasn't particularly eventful, if I'm honest with you. I think Eric Anders, he did go for a lot of takedown attempts. To only, secure 2 takedowns when you attempt that many, it's kind of abysmal, especially, considering he's supposed to be good at wrestling.
So
and a bit of jiu-jitsu.
I got the stat here. He got 3 takedowns out of 24 attempts.
3 takedowns out of 24, very, very poor result as far as that goes down to, as far as it comes down to, the percentage of successful takedowns. I think with Eric Anders, I was watching it, a lot of his takedowns, attempts, I don't think they were necessarily to try to take him down, but a lot of them were to try and wear him out, holding into the cage, use a lot of energy, and I think that, it did benefit him at times. Obviously, the judges scored it Park's way, but I think that, the idea was that, he'd be able to secure some more control. I think Park did very well when, held against the cage, he got a lot of headlocks in. Tried to stand in guillotine, but even then, Park wasn't necessarily trying to submit him all the time. First round or two, he was doing it purely for the sake of just putting out pressure. It's very fatiguing having somebody holding to your head when you're against the cage. And honestly, I thought I was very disappointed because Eric Anders, he's known for his knockout power. He hits hard. He's a big guy.
Explosive athlete.
I think looking at his stats, I mean, I could be wrong, but I think it's something like for his like fights, he's had like 3 wins by KO in the UFC. And he's not been there for long. He's a fighter of Contender Series. We've had a few of them in this card. The middleweight bout as well was also a 2 contenders fighting, as well as Chase Hooper in the prelims, and there might be a few more.
Yeah, talk about Chase Hooper. How impressive was that? His jiu-jitsu throughout that whole match was just elite, and he got the TKO win. I think I saw an odd that it was plus 1,300 to get the TKO victory, and he did it. So congratulations to Chase Hooper. He got the bonus. I'm sure he's happy with that.
Definitely. So I think Chase Hooper, isn't he a black belt in jiu-jitsu? Is that right?
Yeah, he is. I think he trains with Ryan Hall, which is cool. I think Ryan Hall's kind of shown in the ropes. I'm not 100%, but I think I've heard that somewhere.
Oh, okay, that's quite interesting. I mean, to be fair, to have a black belt at 22 years of age, fair play to him. And I mean, he's very good. He's very good. He was good on the Contender. The Contender Series produced a lot of good fighters. But I think that, there's a really interesting, future for Chase Hooper. He's very young in a very competitive division.
I was just about to say the main thing I respect about him is he got chucked. I think he made his debut when he was 19 or 20 years old. And he got chucked in against David Tamer and just a lot of other killers, and he's a kid. I mean, not younger than us, but roughly the same age as us, and he's in there fighting the best fighters on the planet. So I have so much respect for Chase Hooper. He looked a lot physically bigger, stronger, wrestled well. It looks like he could really be putting it together now and becoming a complete fighter. He's got a long time to go till he gets to that status, but every time he fights, I love watching it.
I mean, he's in a really good position right now. He's doing well. His jiu-jitsu is amazing. And he's very young, and as you said about becoming a complete fighter, he's only 20 years of age. Fights in a prime around 29, if not a bit later a lot of the time. I think that, especially in a division like featherweights, he could do well. He's an emerging fighter. A lot of the top fighters in that division are quite old.
Yeah.
Or I say quite old, but are around that prime age. So, give him a few years, there's no reason why he can't go on to do great things. But going back to the Eric Anders fight, there's not a lot to say about it, really. The judges scored at Park, so which was an interesting decision. I thought that I would have went to Eric Anders just because I felt like he was in control of the whole fight. He didn't really do much with it, but he was in control. Although saying that, Park looked good.
Yeah, I think that third round especially stole it for Park because he landed the better. Throughout the whole fight, he was landing the better strikes. He was a good counter puncher, and he's got some good wins on his record, and he's a good fighter. Eric Anders struggled. Like I said, he made it look competitive because how much he was doing. He was so active, always pushing forward. But at the end of the day, when you're scoring a fight, you can't, in my opinion, you can't really just score it for holding someone and trying to drag them into the deep water because one fighter's looking to take your head off and one fighter's looking to grab on. Like, that's just my view on it.
Definitely. So, Park his accuracy as well.
Yeah.
Like, you say you're doing well in the counters. I think that his accuracy, halfway through the fight was something like 60-something%.
That's ridiculous.
Which is a very high, percentage, And, he wasn't throwing a lot of strikes, but I think he was really trying to play it patient. He lost his last fight by knockout, unfortunately. He did very well in the first couple rounds, and the tables did really turn on him. So, but it's nice to see that he's got the win at least. Eric Anders, I've not been particularly impressed with him. So far in the UFC, or they're saying like he's not been in there for very long, so it might be, it's a bit too early to criticise him too much, I think.
I think he needs to start getting some wins under his belt because we've seen the UFC, especially this year, they're very harsh with chopping fighters off out of the UFC. And I no hate on Eric Anders, he's an entertaining, nice guy, he's had some great performances, but he really needs to pick it up, in my opinion.
It's interesting though because I look at the UFC and there are a lot of retired former American football players, and it's interesting because does that make you think to yourself how are there any other sports American football where there are so many fighters transitioning from that to MMA?
No, I think the NFL or not NFL, American football. I think we see so much people transform over to other sports. Especially fighting, we've seen recently because they're all such freak athletes. They're all massive. They're all so athletic. Like that straight away to have your base on fighting on just pure athleticism is straight away something you need. So they can just build skills from there. And we've seen. Not people do great. Greg Hardy's got some good wins, but again struggling right now. So yeah, it's a good base to have. I think Dominic Reyes as well was a footballer. He done really well in MMA. So we've seen success, but I think you need to really concentrate on training your skills if you're gonna come from any other sport into MMA. You need to put all your time into MMA.
Definitely so. I could be wrong in saying this, but I noticed that a lot of American footballers, a lot of former American football players who do go into the UFC, they do have generally very good wrestling. Yeah. And I think that, if you look at wrestling as a sport or as a martial art, if you will, using that as a technique and a foundation in MMA can get you so far. Ben Askren is one of the best examples. If you actually watch Ben Askren strike, it's not great. It's not very good at all.
It's terrible.
And it's not just his throwing or his kicks. It's everything about it, the only thing he does good is that he's relatively aggressive, which prevents him from getting back into the corner, which isn't what he wants. He's a wrestler. He wants to be forced into the corner, so when he does go for his single and double legs, it's a lot easier for him to do so. But, to think, he's a Bellator world champion, smash it in one essay.
I think he was a world champion both, I'm pretty sure.
World champion in both, well, exactly. It does show how, far he can go. If you look at his striking is very, very poor.
Yeah,
very poor on about six different measurements of striking. So I think that a lot of these American footballers could do well, but as you said about the technique, I think they also need to continue to work on their technique and whatnot, because it's not all about being good at wrestling or being good at pummeling someone to the ground.
Yeah, it's just good at takedowns, really. They just power double legs.
yeah, definitely so. Anyway, moving on to the next fight. The next fight was, I believe, was it strawweight?
Yeah, it was Viviana against this I've really struggled with this name. Do you know it? Ricci?
Ricci, that's it. Yeah. So
Ricci.
Poliana Viana versus Tabitha Ricci.
Yeah. So, I mean, the fight was good. I think my view on it straight away off the top of my head is Viviana was way too comfortable on the ground. Like, we saw with Jake Hadley in his debut last week that these jiu-jitsu people don't mind being off their back the whole fight, but in a 3-round fight, it will catch up to you very fast. It was again another fight that was a bit of a struggle to watch at times. I don't know what your view was on it.
So I think as the fight itself, I didn't enjoy watching the fight, and it was a shame really. It was a little bit disappointing because I thought that they both did really well. I mean, Ricci, they both come from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu backgrounds. They both do, and I know that Viana comes from a Muay Thai background. I know Ricci also comes from a striking background. I think what Ricci did well in that fight was Ricci. She's known for being good on top. On top, she's very good. She's very good. Viana's very comfortable on her back, and I think that Ricci did really well on the feet. But if you notice in the first round, Ricci was telling Viana to get up because she's just sitting on her back, waiting for her to get in. And I mean, at the end of the day, when you have a fighter who's unwilling to get on the ground with you as you sit on your back, and they're just taking kicks at your legs over and over again, just scoring little points here and there, then you're not going to win a fight, especially if it's going to decision, which obviously this fight did. And it's a shame really because, Viana's very good. I can't remember which one. I think it was Viana. Do you remember that mugging a couple of years ago?
I'm not sure.
Where that female UFC fighter.
I'm not sure I heard about it.
No, it was quite big in the news and whatnot. So like they attempted to mug her, and she just slapped them up. Well, yeah, exactly.
Not smart. Did you hear Melvin Manov? Did you hear this one? Here, the Bellator fight, obviously kickboxing legend. So some guys were watching his house for a while, and I think they tried to rob him, and he had to pull out his fight with Yoel Romero because he chased after the car and put his hand through the window and dragged the guy out the car, like straight up, just punched through the glass window. And Anthony Smith, there was the time like someone broke into his house. It's not smart trying to rob these fighters.
Definitely not. I mean, if there's someone you don't want to muck about with, it's going to be a UFC fighter, especially UFC fighters like that. But it's mugging. It was a man as well. He proper slapped her up. So like, honestly, he slapped him up.
So what? He attacked her, or
so he attempted to mug her, and she just, I believe it was he tried stealing her phone in like Rio de Janeiro.
Oh, I never heard this.
Yeah, back in 2019.
Wow.
But yeah. Basically, there are photos of them, and I think there are photos of them anyway.
I might have. It's kind of ringing a bell now you're saying it, but that's crazy.
But but anyway, back to the fight. So it wasn't a boring fight to see. I mean, I would have liked to see more from it. I think that when you do just when you do just lie on your back and you don't do anything about it, and you're not as proactive on the feet, she did have her moments on the feet. I think Ricci, edged on the feet, but just spending that time on your back, you're wasting timeless minutes, valuable minutes, of potential point scoring.
See,
by just lying on your back, especially when they're not doing anything about it. There were about 3 or 4 occasions she was called up to her feet by the ref.
Yeah.
And that says it all really. First round, I mean, I've never seen it. She literally looked at her and told her to stand back up, and the ref pulled her up. So it's a shame really because she's such a good fighter. They're both really good fighters. So I think we could have been so much more. It was a good fight though.
Yeah, and so we're not completely sounds like we're shit on Viana. She did win her last 2 fights by submission, so you can see why she was comfortable being there. But at the end of the day, if they're not wanting to engage, then you got to stand up. And in my opinion, I think Viana was looking maybe not better on the feet, but having a lot of success. Like her kicks looked very good, and I thought she looked decent on the feet, but she just couldn't really land anything. And every time Ricci overextended when she was coming in with her combination, she'd be the one to instigate the clinch straight away, pulling her into that guillotine, always looking for that front choke just to grab onto, where I think she should have been more willing to exchange a few shots on the feet, and we could have seen a different result in this fight.
I mean, definitely so. I think, she could have done that. She could have also tried to maybe wrestle to the ground a bit more. I mean, I know that Ricci did, shoot for a few takedowns. A few of them were successful, and they're both really good at jiu-jitsu. They're both good jiu-jitsu fighters. I mean, it reminded me a bit of the way Viera was sitting on her back. Do you remember a couple of weeks ago about was it Viera?
Yeah.
On the back, and him not, and it not wanting to, go down want to go down on Viera, and I mean, it made me it reminded me of it.
But she was comfortable going down with Viviana. Like, she spent a lot of that fight on top, dominating. So I don't know what Viviana was really trying to do, to be honest.
I mean, it's an interesting tactic from Viera. I mean, they're going to know in future, I'm sure there will be a lot of feedback and whatnot, about that. Whether she was being directed or not, it's hard to tell because obviously, I believe it was in Portuguese. Brazilian fighter speaking to them in Portuguese in the corner, so it's quite hard to, gather what was being said.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what the corner was telling them, spend more time on your back, pull them in, drag them in. But regardless, okay fight. I mean, it could have gone differently if they decided to take it differently. As you said, Ricci did do well on top at times. But I think it's just a matter of Viera was relying too much on doing it from her back.
Yeah.
She wanted to fight it from her back.
And she was always looking, you could see she was always grabbing the wrist, looking to set something up, but it was just, she couldn't get it. And I mean, I don't know how many rounds it will take for you to be like, all right, I might not be able to get a submission, let's try something else. And it just seemed like that didn't register.
Definitely not. So next fight is the middleweight bout between Chidi, I hope I pronounced this correctly, NJ Carney versus Dusko Todorovic. Don't think I pronounced that one either. Interesting fight. Both middleweights, both from the Contender Series. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this was, it was the most, not the most entertaining fight, but the most entertaining thing that happened on the main card where we saw that excellent elbow KO. And straight away, Todorovic was looking to grapple. His credentials in wrestling and grappling, he's very good. So he shoots straight away. In Chukani, something like that. I'm not really sure, but he got that front choke locked in straight away. Tried to roll with it. It looked like it was in deep for a minute. Todorovic was able to get out, and they scrambled back to the feet. And Todorovic enters the clinch, and straight away, as soon as the space opens, that elbow hits and knocks him clean out first round. Beautiful elbow. I love watching knockouts like that.
I mean, it was a really good knockout. The fight itself, it was generally pretty good. It was very exciting, very fast paced, started very quickly. I thought Chidi did well in the fight. I mean, Chidi, I believe he's also a former American football player. I believe that I could be wrong, but I could be wrong. I know that Todorovic, obviously, he went in, he tried to do a lot of wrestling and whatnot. Both massive guys. And obviously, I think NJ kind of said that he had done a bit of jiu-jitsu as part of his camp, and you could definitely tell that it benefited him, especially when it came down to that takedown defense and whatnot. Other than the fact that he's just an athlete unit. But and I mean the knockout as well. I think that requires a certain level of fight intelligence to be able to react to that quickly. A lot of fighters, obviously, they're in a position where they have space and whatnot. And they either hesitate or they don't switch on right away, so it doesn't click to go for that elbow. The moment he was able to produce space for himself, he gets in the clinch, he makes the space to perform the elbow, he goes for it right away, and he lands it, and obviously he hits hard. He probably hits like a truck. So, I mean, I just think the intelligence of that, I think that he is going to go far in it. Both came off Contender, both relatively newish fighters to the UFC, so it should be really quite interesting. Only knockout / TKO on the main card as well. So, and
Todorovic, he is also the only guy who's TKO'd Michel Pereira, who we saw win in the co-main event, which is a cool little stat. He relies on his grappling a lot, but he's got hands as well. He's got some good wins by knockout. It was a shame we didn't get to see this fight play out a little more because both big prospects in the UFC right now. I'm excited to see where they both go from here. It's going to be interesting to see who Todorovic gets matched up with next and how he does, because I was actually more excited for him, and then Chukani has just come through and shocked me, to be honest, with how easy he made that look, because they're both very high level fighters, and excited to see them both fight from here.
I mean, it's really interesting. So, like, looking at Dusko, he's finished 10 out of 11 of his wins. 7 by knockout, 3 by submissions, and he's got 7 first-round finishes in 1 minute 30, in 1 minute 41 or less for 5 of them.
Yeah.
So, both of which clearly have immense power. And, it's really interesting, looking at Chidi, his stats for, like, when it comes down to, his finishes and whatnot, I think he has, like, the 3rd fastest middleweight finish in history, UFC anyway, at 16 seconds. The 3rd fastest finish.
That's
for like
impressive.
a relatively new fighter. He came off a contender not too long ago whatsoever. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And it's clear to see, he had a lot of power. He's very aggressive. Watching them fight, the first thing they were looking to do was almost finish it. Like they were, like full gas ahead, really, really going for it.
Was it Barriot he finished in his debut? Was that the 16-second one? I'm pretty sure it was, and I mean Barriot's a very good fighter, so to get a win like that on your debut, it might not be. I could be completely wrong at it, but so he's looking very exciting. I'm actually really excited to see what he does.
I mean, it is really quite interesting. Barriot, Marc-Andre Barriot,
Well,
so
that's impressive.
16-second knockout at Fight Night 200. Fair play. I mean, he's done really well in the UFC so far, and it's exciting to see where he does go from. He's 33 years of age, so he's came into it quite old.
Got to get his running boots on.
But now he's clearly done well. So it should be really exciting to see where he goes in the future.
Yeah.
So if you want to move us on to the next fight.
So the next fight was the co-main event. We had Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Michel Pereira. The fight lived up exactly to how it should be. I don't know what your thoughts were on it. It was an all-out war.
Honestly, I absolutely love the fight. It was really, really good. Pereira looked so sharp, so good, so powerful, so accurate. It was really, really exciting, and Ponzinibbio also looked really, really good. I mean, it's hard to call it definitively, if I'm honest with you. I thought that, there were times in which, I think this first round was very clearly Pereira's. And I think that the 3rd and 2nd was relatively equally contested, although, saying that, I feel like Pereira probably did have most of the 2nd round.
Yeah.
But it was just really, really exciting. And, the amount of energy from both of them, the amount of effort and desire, you could tell that both fighters really wanted it. I think Pereira said, not Pereira, sorry, I think it's Ponzinibbio said beforehand that he wanted to, look at being in a position to fight for championship, which is, a big bold statement from someone 14th.
Yeah.
And Pereira said that he wanted to get ranked around that 14 mark, so both fighters really want something. Both fighters have really, really clear goals.
Yeah.
And I mean, as a fight, like watching the last minute of the 3rd round, both of them are going for it. They're both absolutely knackered, but they're still slugging it out. Yeah, sure, very little technique, but they were going for it. And fair play, it was an absolute war.
Yeah, obviously Ponzinibbio, he talks about these title hopes because he was looking like he was going towards that direction, and he had a lot of time out. I think it was a blood illness or something like that, a blood disease, and not only almost ended his fighting career, almost like took away his life. It was that serious, if I'm not wrong, and he had a lot of time out because of that. We've seen a lot of his prime been taken away through that, and it's a shame because he's still got so much heart and puts on wars every time, but he just seems like he is not up to the pace anymore that he was a few years ago when he was knocking out Neil Magny, sorry, and running through the ranks looking like a top contender. He came back and fought Jay Liang and got knocked out and beat Beza and has had a couple losses since then, but every fight but that Liang one has been very competitive, and I really want to see him get back to winning ways and get on a run and do well before he has to retire, because it's just not ideal.
I mean, it's an interesting one, really. The division itself is so stacked. It's such a stacked division, and I think being in the top 15 of that division is like being in the top 10, or I'd say even maybe a bit of a stretch, but the top 5 of some divisions. And I think that there's a lot of potential for him to really go forward and continue to develop. He's been in there for quite some time now. Going back to his illness, it was like a blood infection.
Yeah.
I think he had like a 103-degree fever, something like that.
He lost a lot of weight as well.
Yeah. So obviously, that's a bit of a setback and whatnot. But with that division, it fluctuates.
A bit of a setback. It took him out for 2 years.
Well,
So.
2 years, yeah. So quite a setback,
Big setback.
But even then, 2 years out, there are fighters who can recover from that.
Yeah.
And it would be really exciting to see him go further. I mean, Michael Pereira, fair play. He looked really, really good. Do you know when his last battle was? Am I right in saying it was quite some while ago?
It was a while ago. Was his last one Filial? I want to say. I know he's been quite active and he's got a lot of wins, so I could get any of them muddled up with each other. But I'm pretty sure his last one was Filial.
Okay, yeah. So saying that, yeah. So his last fight, was Filial, back in 2022.
Yeah.
He's been fighting quite consistently and whatnot. Don't know why I said it a while back. Back in January. Only about 4 months ago or so, but he's been doing really, really well. I think he's had 5 wins on the chart.
Yeah.
So he's been doing really well. Beat Chaos Williams, Nico Price. Neither are
he's got
poor
some
fighters.
good wins. And Filial's on a tear now, looking like a killer. Since that fight, so it's only better. Quickly, just go back to that Ponzinibbio point. Before he had the 2-year layoff and the injury, he'd only lost 2 fights in the UFC. At that point, and he ran through most of the division. Court McGee, Zach Cummins, Mike Perry, Gunnar Nelson, KO'd Gunnar Nelson, Neil Magny, KO'd as well. I mean, he was a few fights away from a title shot, and it's a shit. That one really hurts me deep down that he had to take so much time off because he puts on such entertaining fights every time.
Oh, definitely so. I mean, looking at his career, in the UFC and MMA in general, I mean, as far as, UFC fights are concerned, he was fighting almost every 3 months, from 2015 to 2017.
Yeah.
He was consistently fighting, and he's been fighting in the UFC since, I believe, 2013. So he's been in the UFC for a very, very long time. Not a lot of fighters necessarily make out far in the UFC as far as actual duration spent in the UFC. A lot of them get cut, a lot of them go to different organisations and whatnot. So to be in the UFC for God almost, what was that? That's about 10 years now.
Yeah,
10 years of service. That's a lot of time to spend in the UFC. Especially considering he's had such a significant long layoff. But looking at his win record, he doesn't do anything other than win really. I mean, he's got a couple of losses here and there, but it's almost like he has about 4 or 5 wins and then a loss. 3 wins and then a loss. So it's not exactly as if he's it's not exactly as if he's and as he said, he was on a tear as well. Neil Magny, Mike Perry, Gunnar Nelson, Zach Cummings. Yeah, I mean, it should be really interesting, and hopefully he can really bounce back. Hopefully he does go on another tear again, and hopefully he does make the best of his remainder of his career.
Yeah, I think I'm not desperate to move on to the main event, if I'm going to be honest, but so you want to get us kicked off with that one?
Of course. So the main event of this one, it was Holly Holm. We all know Holly Holm. She fought Ronda Rousey, put an end to it. Probably one of her biggest achievements. She was fighting Ketlin Viera. Interesting fight, bantamweight. Holly Holm, she's very old now. I mean, I say she's very well. Yeah, she is very old. Yeah, she's 40 years of age. To be fighting the UFC at 40 years of age, and at that point, your body starts breaking down. There aren't many fighters in the UFC who are fighting at 40 years of age, and the ones which are the likes of Arlovski and whatnot, and they're clearly not what they used to be just because of age. But I mean, if I'm honest with you, as far as the fight was concerned, I don't think it was necessarily a poor fight. It just wasn't a very interesting fight. I thought that she did really well with her kicks. She was throwing a lot of good kicks to the torso, the body.
Leg kicks.
Leg kicks.
I don't know. I would love to have the stat in front of me. I should have got it really, but I want to know how many leg kicks she landed during that fight because we'll get into who we thought won in a minute, but just tapping the legs the whole time, just constantly for 5 rounds. Weren't the most damaging shots, but she was very active, always looking to do something in the fight at least. I guess I'll give her credit for that.
Let's put it this way, she had 188 strikes landed. Viera had 122 strikes landed. So, the difference is about 60 strikes or so.
Yeah.
Which is quite a significant difference in strikes,
What's the significant strikes?
Well, so it's interesting because significant strikes, considering there were 60 more strikes, only 11 more.
All right.
So 96 to 85. So, quite interesting really. But, yeah, I mean, as a fight, it was okay. It wasn't great. There was a lot of grappling involved.
Yeah.
Which I didn't really think was, necessary to Holly Holm's advantage. I think she should have tried to keep it more on the feet. Obviously, you can't always keep them on the feet, especially when you're fighting somebody who is a very good grappler.
So powerful as well on the feet. It's dangerous.
Yeah. But honestly, like I think that I feel like less time spent against the cage, the better really for Holly Holm. As far as the scoring is concerned, it's a hard one. Really, it's a controversial one. A lot of people say it's a robbery. I don't know about that. It's hard to judge MMA because when you're just judging MMA as a judge, you don't get the opportunity to spend 5 or 10 minutes watching it over and ticking off boxes. You don't. You have to judge it at the time, and there are a lot of things when it comes down to MMA judging, such as ground control and whatnot, which although yes may appear to be very much clear and stated, they're all relatively subjective. Same with significant strikes. What necessarily constitutes a significant strike?
Yeah, because those leg kicks, in my opinion, weren't all significant strikes.
No, not at all.
No.
But anyway, I mean, going down to the judging of it, obviously I know you've got quite a lot to say about it, so if you will, go for me.
Yeah, so I think, although the fight, I've seen a lot of comments saying this is the worst robbery they've ever seen and things like that, which I think is absolutely mental, to be honest, because no, you can't say a fight's a robbery when one fighter lands. I mean, to be fair, I do actually think Holly Holm won. I think she won 3 rounds at least. But I also think that when you're fighting in such, it's going to sound bad what I'm going to go into here, because Holly Holm in recent years has fought in such a negative way, in my opinion. She looks to clinch against the cage a lot, even though all her critics, I don't know what she's won in boxing, but loads of titles in boxing, karate fighter. We've seen her question mark kicks, knockouts. We've seen her turning kick Ronda Rousey, knock her out, and yet she's looking to hold jiu-jitsu fighters against the cage just because it seems like she hits really hard. That's how I saw it. And when she was on the feet and she got the rhythm going, knocked her down with a side kick in the last round. Holly Holm looked very good in the last round. Got her down with a side kick, landing a lot of stamps to the knee. But I seriously think every time I see a Holly Holm fight as a main event on the card, I'm no matter what the undercard is, I just can't get myself really, really pumped up to, because I know we had to do this weekend, knowing I have to come back and watch that fight again and break it down like we had to do with the Rose fight, and like I think it's similar in my opinion. Holly, nowhere near as bad as the Rose fight, but like you have to engage, you have to look to win these fights, and I think the reason she lost is because she held her against the cage and did nothing for a majority of the fight. That's my opinion on it. It might sound harsh. I don't know what yours is, but that's how I saw it.
I think as far as game plan is concerned, I don't think it was. I don't know whether it was part of the game plan or not. But I think if it was, it was generally very poor. Whether that was something, she had developed herself, she developed in.
She's done that in a lot of fights though recently.
If in that scenario, then it's probably something down to her as an individual. Yeah. I mean, watching her fight, she's not as fast or as reactive as she used to be. Yeah. And obviously, that probably does come down to age. There are a lot of fighters who are also 40 who also, experience very similar things, not as reactive as they used to be, not as fast, not as sharp. And I think that, sometimes, not necessarily a panic mode, but more of almost like a protective mode to try and, protect the fight from not going her way. She was trying to hold him against the cage in an attempt to try and get some points.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, I think that when you're holding him against the cage, but you're not really doing anything with it, it's always risky because you're basically just holding someone against the cage who, other than that, is going to do bits on the ground with you.
And even Viera was landing hard knees in the clinch, even though her back was against the cage. She was looking to break away, she was really looking to fight Holly Holm.
Yeah, definitely so. I mean, I think when you're trying to control somebody, for whatever reason it might be, I don't know what the reason for it exactly was, but say, for example, you're trying to, control them, and they're doing more in the clinch than you are, you're doing it wrong. If you're trying to achieve something by holding somebody or by pinning somebody, and they're just doing bits on the ground or bits against the cage, you're not benefiting yourself. What you're doing is that you're expending a lot of energy, slowing yourself down even later on in the fight, because it went to decision, 5 rounds, 25-minute fight, 25 minutes of, let's put it this way, if you're holding someone against the cage for a long period of time, you're knackered. you're going to be knackered. It requires a lot of force to be able to maintain somebody against the cage, because if they're wriggling and punching you and doing everything they can to get out, you're exerting a lot of energy, so are they. Yeah. So I just think that there was no real clear benefit to it, and it's a shame really. She did look really good on the feet, as you said in the last round, but was it a side kick to the side kick to the chest or whatever it was?
Yeah, straight to the chest.
Straight to the chest, not the ground.
Style.
That's the thing, and if she did more of that, she could have definitely came off better, really. And I mean, as far as the shooting goes, I mean, it's a hard one, really. As I said, judging an MMA competition is much more difficult to watching it, back a few times or whatever it may be. But I think that, honestly, I don't feel like Holly Holm deserved to win that.
That's how I felt about it too.
So, I mean, overall, it wasn't even necessarily a poor fight. Yes, there were times in which she was holding his cage. There were really good parts of the fight. Just like a lot of fights in this card, there were times in which, they weren't necessarily the most entertaining fights, or they weren't necessarily the best fights to watch. But there were snippets of quality. There were periods of time which were really good. Unfortunately, the way this fight went, I just would have liked to seen it gone differently. Whether it would have worked better if Holly decided to stand up a bit more, spend less time against the cage and whatnot. Maybe, it might have not even gone away that way.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have been a matter of she was holding her against the cage for her own protection.
Yeah, obviously she was getting hurt as well.
She was getting hurt, and if she gets taken to the ground with somebody like that, if you're holding something against the cage and whatnot, maybe her mindset is, I don't want to get taken down. I don't want her to try jiu-jitsu on me. I don't want her to try and, wrap me up.
You fought Ronda Rousey, man. I just can't see that would be her mindset. Who takes...
How many years ago was that? How many years?
Yeah, but who since then has really been able to take her down and hold her there? Like, it just doesn't happen. You need to have... Same with Rose. It's like she was really scared to get taken down. Like, we've seen their skills to know that Carla could very well take Rose down and dominate, but it showed very well not to be that way. And no offense to Viera, I think she's a very good fighter, but I couldn't see her doing that to Holly Holm. So I think sometimes to be great, I mean, Holly Holm's a legend and she's been great, but she talks about wanting to get that title again. She talks about wanting another title shot. To be great again in this game, she's going to have to take risks, and I just don't see that in her fights recently, and that's why I don't think she should be main eventing anymore.
Very bold statement, very bold statement. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for listening. We haven't had as much to go over this card as we normally do.
There was just a couple things I actually wanted to go through.
I'll ignore me, then ignore me.
Yeah. We can go for a little bit longer. So just a few news articles just for us to chat about. It says, could Michael Chandler be the perfect comeback opponent for Connor McGregor? And I just want to get your opinion on that. Who do you think would be the ideal return for McGregor when he returns? Do you think Chandler, a Ferguson, even, I mean, he's talked about fighting Usman and Oliveira jumping right into a title shot. Do you think he'll fight one of the lower contenders, or do you think he'll jump right back in where he left off, fighting a Poirier or someone like that?
I mean, if I'm completely honest with you, I don't believe that he deserved to jump in and fight Oliveira. I really don't. It doesn't matter how big a name he is. It doesn't matter, what he's necessarily done in the past. He just hasn't performed that well recently. If we have a look at his stats, going back to the past, 5 fights, he's lost 3 of them, won 2 of them. He beat Donald Cerrone, obviously Donald Cerrone, back in 2020.
What year was that?
2020. And then he lost to Dustin Poirier twice. Before that, he lost to Khabib, and then he beat Alvarez before that in 2016. So over the space of since 2016, he's won 3 out of 5 fights, which is more wins than losses. But
really,
yeah.
So how many has he lost in a row now, Conor McGregor?
Well, he's only lost 2 in a row, but his last win was Cerrone back in 2020.
It's because he takes so much time off every time.
And that's the thing, though. I think if you're going to take that much time off, if you're not actively competing and whatnot, you can't be given these big title shots. I think that a lot of people would like to see something like Oliveira, and obviously it would do insane on the pay-per-view. It would. Conor always does.
Yeah. I mean, that's guaranteed. Like, I think Oliveira is becoming a star now. Like, you saw him running down the tunnel after his win, and he was like, "The champion has a name, and that's Charles the Bronx." There's things that people really like to see, and Oliveira's nailing all those boxes with his fights. Again, one of these fighters I wish could talk a bit more English, just to really pump their name out there. You've seen that hinder fighters a lot in the past, but Oliveira's a star, like just all out. Like he can do pay-per-views. McGregor can do pay-per-views. I really wouldn't be surprised if that's the fight they make. I wouldn't even be joking.
I mean, if that's the fight they make, then fair enough. But it's not the fight I'd like to see. But anyway, you said about Chandler.
That's the fight I think they probably will do. But I don't know, because I think even Dana might see it as a bit crazy chucking him in for especially not Usman. I don't even think we're going to entertain that and talk about that ever on this podcast unless it gets announced. But I think Chandler's the fight to go. I still think it's a terrible matchup for Conor McGregor, although Chandler leaves himself open a lot. Like McGregor could sleep Chandler. I mean, we've seen worse people sleep Chandler, worse counter punches, and McGregor's still top quality at doing that. We saw that in the Poirier fights. But I think that's the fight to go with. I wouldn't even mind seeing him fight someone lower, like it's hard now to really. You can't really put McGregor. Tony Ferguson, I think that could be the fight. Again, I think that's a bit harsh on Tony. I think he should be fighting a lower guy too. But
I don't feel like that would be the correct matchup for Tony Ferguson, just personally. I think that Michael Chandler, I feel like they're both kind of in the ideal position to fight each other. You know, with Michael Chandler, obviously, you know, he just lost to Charles Oliveira, he just lost to Justin Gaethje, and he just beat Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson, he's a bit old now. You know, he had did he have a little bit of a layoff? I think he did, didn't he? We spoke about it last time.
A year off.
He had a year layoff, you know, and he beat Tony Ferguson. I think that, you know, with Chandler, you know, losing to Gaethje and Charles Oliveira, these were the two fighters which, you know, in my opinion, he definitely just shouldn't be fighting. So I think that it kind of makes sense, you know, for somebody who's just lost to the champion, or well, I say the champion, you know, and Gaethje. I believe, in my opinion, it makes sense for him to fight Conor, as Conor's had a bit of time off, although Conor's the name he is. And I think that with the fight itself, I think Conor, you know, I think he'd do okay. But I think with Chandler, right, I don't know how Conor conducts himself, how he would conduct himself in his camp and whatnot. I know he trains hard, and I know he does, you know, what he can and whatnot. But whether he's not been training as much as you would in a camp, just because he's not fighting
as well.
And he's got a broken leg, exactly. And I think that Chandler's just so athletic. But I think that, you know, with Conor's resources and whatnot, it would just be interesting to see how Conor prepares for it. I think that it does make sense logically for the matchup, because I think that, you know, somebody who's just lost to Gaethje and Oliveira, another person who's also just lost to two champions.
Yeah,
I think it makes a lot of sense.
I think it makes sense. I don't like the matchup necessarily for Conor because, I mean, Chandler's already shown that even if you're the best on the planet, that it's no walk in the park. He can hurt you, he can knock you out, he can finish you at any time. And Conor McGregor, coming off such a bad injury, such a long layoff, knockout losses, it's got another knockout for Conor McGregor written all over it, in my opinion. Early prediction, I would say Chandler runs for him. I actually would, but Conor's got the skills to beat Chandler. If I'm talking about old Conor, I'd go with Conor every day. Although I don't think Chandler necessarily fights smart enough to really just go out there and maul him with the wrestling like he could. He could submit him, he could play with him on the ground, because Chandler's so good on the ground. But yeah, I think that's the fight that will happen. I'm excited for it. I think if that fight doesn't happen, he's going to be fighting Oliveira. So either or, I think he loses. I think if he really wants to come back and be great again, he needs to build back up.
I think that, you know, with Conor, obviously he's such a big name and whatnot, and he means a lot to the UFC as an asset.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, he's one of those fighters, you know, considering he's only had 5 fights in about 8 years, you know, it really shows that when you're continuously being put against contenders, how valuable you are, as far as, you know, as far as, you know, pay-per-view value is. And I think that, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if they do put against someone like Oliveira, because obviously, you know, how big a name he is, and how much, you know, how much of an absolute animal he is. You know, Oliveira, he could be one of the greatest of all time. You know, a bit early to say.
But do you think Dana White thinks that the Conor McGregor's dwindling out, and we've got a couple more big fights to get him in before the star dies because he's just lost so much? Or do you think that I can push McGregor back up this division and put him in loads more fights when he gets back on the ball and becomes a champion again. Do you think that's actually a realistic target for Connor at this point?
I think with Conor McGregor, I think a lot of it comes down to he's at a point now where it's going to be almost all financial.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
there aren't many more fights in which there's no point in him. I mean, there is a point, but logically, there's no point in him taking much more damage and progressing through UFC because he's very financially sorted. He's got a business, proper 12, he sponsor every UFC event. It feels like.
He's got bloody hundreds of businesses.
Tailor
suits and all that stuff. But the thing is, McGregor's pride is hurt at this point. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you load up to Twitter and it's people memeing him all the time, and it's all these people that have not done much in their lives coming at someone like him. That's really going to affect him if he sees thousands of them a day.
I don't know that you see, because I feel like somebody like that, when they have achieved what they have, and when they're in a position they are financially, I don't know if he really cares that much.
I don't know. I think when he goes to bed at night, that's the first thing on his mind when he puts his head on the pillow is all what everyone else thinks. I think he's that type of guy.
I don't know, but it's hard because obviously I'm nowhere near that position.
Yeah.
But I just think he just doesn't bother him at all. But that's just me. That's just me. I think the reason why I'd like to see him and Michael Chandler fight is because Michael Chandler, he's doing well in the UFC as far as he's definitely building himself up in the UFC, and he's doing well building himself up in the UFC, and I think that fighting a name like Conor McGregor could just give him that extra boost, and I think that I think it would make a lot of sense for Dana White as far as the UFC is concerned, is that if they were to pair those two together in a bout, it'd be a massive pay-per-view because Conor's in it, and Michael Chandler would get so much coverage. And so much, I feel like it would really just boost him, because to be able to, be in that position, like you got to think like Michael Chandler, he's just beat Tony Ferguson, but prior to that, he lost to Viera. And I mean, there aren't many other fighters in that division he can really fight, other than maybe like a rematch.
Or a Beneil Dariush, I think that would make sense. But I also think Chandler's at a point now already that he can only take big fights now as well. Like, Chandler can't go and fight some really good up-and-coming contender because it does nothing for him. Chandler's in a position where, unless he gets the Conor fight, or unless he wins the title, he's not going to be, star-wise, any bigger than he can be now. We've seen how good he is on the mic. Everyone loves Michael Chandler. We've seen how exciting he is. I mean, everyone and their mum's talking about Michael Chandler right now because what he's bringing to the table when it comes to this sport. And I think that is probably even bigger than the Oliveira fight right now, Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor, because how well Chandler can do on the mic. And if not, it's just going to be a crazy Conor McGregor screaming at Oliveira, just like it was the whole Aldo press conferences. So, yeah, I'd rather see the Chandler fight.
That's exactly what you said. That's what I think why it would be good.
Yeah.
Because I just think that they're both big personalities and whatnot. Michael Chandler, obviously, he's up there. He's a massive name. Every UFC fan knows him. Every UFC fan who follows the fights in the lightweight division definitely knows him. I just think that that fight would just add that final little bit, that final little push.
It'd be huge if he won that fight.
And not only that, I think obviously it's hard to find a fighter for him to fight. Because obviously, he's just fought Oliveira and Gaethje. But having just beat Tony, I feel like to go from Tony to potentially a title shot, it's just there needs to be a buffer.
He needs one more, doesn't he?
Just a little buffer, something thin, and I think Conor's that perfect buffer.
That's exactly why I brought it up. Because that's the perfect fight for him right now. For Chandler, I mean, he seems like he really wants to fight. I'd be desperate for the fight if I was him, because I'd be looking at Conor McGregor like, you've just come after these wars with Justin Gaethje and almost knocked out Charles Oliveira. Now you got to go fight a guy who hasn't really been competing in this division. I mean, ever really. Like, he beat Eddie Alvarez. I think that's his only win at lightweight. If we look at just the facts, I'm not hating on Conor McGregor. Yeah. He never defended his title, and at every other fight he's had at lightweight, he lost. So it's like, if I was Chandler, I'd be looking at McGregor right now like, that's the fight I want. That's the only fight I want, unless I'm getting a title shot, and that's what he's doing. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to talk about right now. Like, I think Conor brings such excitement to the sport that everyone is gonna talk about him all the time. A lot of people don't like it. I don't even know if we've mentioned Conor McGregor's name since starting the podcast, so I think we've done pretty well so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because I think Conor McGregor, like, they're obviously, UFC is growing a lot bigger and a lot bigger, but if you look at, 5 years ago, there weren't many names in UFC. If you'd never, like, heard of UFC ever, if you'd, like, never watched, like, UFC or heard of it or looked into it, I think, like, Conor McGregor, he's one of those names which you'd know. Like, for example, in football, you know the name's Ronaldo. Yeah, exactly. And I think that Conor McGregor was that of the UFC. And I feel like, obviously, like, yes, a lot of people do now know a lot of UFC fighters because obviously they have their own ventures outside the UFC, and, it's now also broadcasted in the media, on a very frequent basis, in some circumstances, as much as sports like football and whatnot, and it shows how big it is, especially when you have MMA fighters transitioning over to, having boxing fights and whatnot.
Yeah.
It shows how big it's growing as, not just in the regular world, but in the combat sport world as well.
Talking of boxing and MMA, did you see Anderson Silva this weekend?
I did not know.
He had another boxing match. I think he got the knockout, or it was a late knockdown. Just show you the video quick. Look, gets him in the corner. He's transitioned into boxing so well, and look how he moves still. 50 almost.
Wow, that's amazing.
And look, here it comes, uppercut. Look how quick his hands are. Bang, drops him with the hook.
Wow, that's amazing.
Anderson looking clean still. I want that Jake Paul fight to happen. Anderson, Jake Paul is the fight to make right now. I'd love to see Anderson just knock him out.
I mean, what one MMA fight has to do it at least.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
we sent Ben Askren to it. Let's just stop playing games. Let's just send Anderson Silva out there to take out Jake Paul.
So he can actually throw a punch.
Yeah, bury him in the desert somewhere, fight somewhere good. Anderson knocks him out. That would be the ideal scenario for me. Not actually bury him in the desert. That's a Conor McGregor quote.
Of course. I mean, it's interesting though because I've always thought to myself, if an MMA fighter were to go into boxing, you'd think, assuming it was, somebody who had just started training boxing with the past year or so, you'd think that they'd do bits, but it's really surprising. Like Tyron Woodley, this is a world champ getting KO'd by a YouTuber who's been training it for like a year and a half. Very good, one mind. He's very, very good at it. But I think that Anderson Silva would genuinely be like the most interesting one to watch because it could really show. Because obviously, there aren't many better strikers.
I would like to see
in GOAT status anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean Anderson. If Anderson went and lost to Jake Paul, there's no one else we can really send at that point. Like unless we send some young active fighter. But if we're talking about UFC legends, Anderson's at the top of them. Another fight I wouldn't mind seeing is Bisping. Has been calling. Jake Paul's been calling out Bisping a lot. Bisping's got one eye, no knees, a hip missing or something. I think a hip, but he's had 2 knee replacements. But I still favour Bisping in that matchup because the long time striking. He won the belt with one eye. But the only reason I'm glad that fight's not happening is because I could not live on this planet if Jake Paul managed to KO Michael Bisping.
Yeah,
that would be terrible.
I mean, it would be devastating, really. It would be interesting to see how it would play out. I think that obviously, I don't think Bisping is the correct matchup. Obviously, I'm sure he could still go some.
Yeah,
I really am.
I wouldn't be surprised if he bulldozed Jake Paul still.
But I think just with those injuries and whatnot, it's not fair. It's not Bisping fighting Jake Paul at his prime.
No.
It's not him fighting slightly past his prime. It's it's Jake Paul would be fighting somebody with many injuries and ailments, and it's just I don't think it should ever really happen.
No.
But I think Anderson Silva would be a really interesting one. Somebody with striking like that, somebody who's still as sharp as that, and somebody who does move like that. I think it would really be quite interesting. I think that when it comes down to MMA and boxing, I feel like we do make the comparison maybe a little bit too much.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I think that they're 2 completely different sports. Well, I mean, they're obviously 2 completely different sports.
Put most MMA fighters in a ring, they'll get battered. Put any boxer in an octagon, they get battered. But at the end of this, there's only a few. I mean, I'd love to see how Anderson did in his prime. Ngannou, I think, would do decent at heavyweight just because his KO power and chin. But there's not many at all that will do well. But if people say Holloway Holloway gets hit way too much to be a professional boxer. I mean, he probably could still go and be a pro, but to go and compete for a world title, Holloway, I think he's absorbed the most strikes in the UFC or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
I've seen some stat like that. So yeah, there's not many at all. I'm done with talking about boxing. The sport's dry, in my opinion. It's dead.
I don't know about that. But anyway, just one more point. I know you're done with talking about boxing. I think that one of the biggest reasons why MMA fighters go into boxing doesn't always necessarily work is because because you use a lot of boxing strikes, also known as punches in MMA, doesn't mean that fighting in MMA using strikes such as punches necessarily means that you're a good boxer. Because the boxing technique, yes, obviously you might throw a jab the same, but the way you fight in an MMA fight, you're not fighting like you would in a boxing fight. And the way they train, they're not doing boxing drills, they're doing MMA drills. They might do a bit of boxing here and there, a bit of work on the heavy bag, maybe a bit of footwork, but you're not continuously training like you're going to be, fighting a boxing fight in 2 or 3 months. You're training like you're going to be fighting an MMA fight. If you've been pro boxing for 5 years, and then, you get an MMA fighter fighting in MMA for 5 years, they've done a bit of boxing and whatnot, maybe they've done some speed drills, some boxing-inspired speed drills. You're basically sending somebody who doesn't stand the right way, who doesn't probably hold their arms in the correct guard, because the boxing guard is obviously, it's very, typically very compact and whatnot, because obviously, you're not having to worry about, the variables which you do in MMA, there's not as many outputs, there's no grappling, there's no
leg kicks, body kicks,
tie clinching or anything like that. Yeah. So I just think that, putting the two, it's like putting somebody who sprints, who's a world-class sprinter, sticking them in a football match and seeing how well they do over the space of 90 minutes in regards to how they run, because running with the ball is different to fighting, in a different style.
Yeah.
You're not sprinting with the ball when you're a professional sprinter. You're not fighting like a boxer when you're a professional MMA fighter.
Even the little things like the combinations. You don't see a boxer step running through with a 3-punch combination because they'll get countered every time. You see the MMA fighters so much as they throw the 1-2 and then they'll launch the left hook after it, because that's you got light gloves on. You haven't got as much protection. You can't really block punches, so you're a lot more safe winging punches because people are more concentrated on getting out the way than they are. I mean, in boxing where you can parry and just straight up counter so fast. Like, that's why we see counter punches do so well, like Adrian Yanez, Connor McGregor. There's loads and loads and loads of other ones, but they're the ones that come to my head. Do so well in the UFC is because it's that boxing style. Is you see so many MMA fighters try step through with their combinations and you get countered for it in boxing most of the time, and against these great counter punches in MMA too. We've got to about an hour, so we'll wrap it up now. Thank you guys for listening. This has been Combat Chatters. Cheers.